Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world.
So welcome back to another edition of Impactful Teamwork. I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast today. And today I'm going to be talking about a topic I can't believe I haven't spoken about yet because it is so fascinating. This is something I became really interested in over the last few years. And this is about the neuroscience of high performance. How do we as leaders become better at what we do? How can we become more productive, more effective, do more in less time? And it's all about how do we harness the power of flow. This is why last year I actually trained to become a high performance flow consultant with the Flow Research Collective. And it was an incredible 6 months of training with them that really helped me unlock those triggers that enable us to access flow. It's something that I practice each and every day, and it has made a massive difference to my business. So I really wanted to include a section on this today because there is so much about how we can improve flow in teams and therefore accelerate this superpower of teamwork within our businesses. So really excited to get into today's content because I think a lot of people might have heard of the term flow, not really sure what it is. It's not a buzzword, although often it is bandied around. People are like, get into flow, things will be better when your team is in flow. But what really is it? It's actually a scientifically based optimal state of performance. And it can really transform how teams operate. If you can understand and harness flow, it's going to be able to lead to this greater productivity, creativity, and overall satisfaction within your team. So what exactly is flow? When I was doing my training, I had to create what we call a magnus opus, which was a piece of really deep scientific research. I did this on harnessing flow in equine facilitated learning to enhance the ROI on the training experience. I have interrelated the areas of this high performance flow with working with the horses and how the experience with the horses activates flow states. And when we're in flow states, that makes us learn more effectively. And therefore, for an organization, gives them a higher return on investment for the experience. It was a really interesting piece of research to do and something that I actually need to get published and not leave sitting on my shelf. But anyway, I'm going to draw from some of that research today as we talk about the importance of flow for team success. So what exactly is flow? So flow is an optimal state of consciousness, a peak state where we both feel at our best and perform at our best. And that's a quote from Stephen Kotler, who is actually the founder of the Flow Research Collective and a real pioneer in this whole area of what is flow and how, more importantly, can we as individuals activate flow. And it's a state where we feel like time has stopped and you're in perfect harmony with what you're doing. And I'd love you to just think about a time when that's been for you. Where have you been in flow? Where have you been doing an activity and you looked up and it felt like only minutes had gone by and actually hours and hours had passed? And I know for me, that can be when I'm writing. I love to write, as many, I've written a couple of books and been a co-author in 2 more. So actually when I'm writing, I can get really into a flow state. I also know that I access flow states when I'm delivering my experiential leadership workshops with the horses. I just love doing those. And a day just flies by and it doesn't feel like any time has gone at all. And some people in a kind of sports context might call it as like being in the zone. We often hear about that with athletes, that they're in the zone. You're at the beginning of the Olympics at the 100-meter sprint race And we see athletes going through their routine that gets them into the zone so that they're at optimal performance when that gun goes off and they start the race. Somebody who did a lot of work on this is a guy called Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, and he described it as a state of optimal arousal, and it's the sweet spot of peak performance. And as we said, when we access this state, we improve productivity and creativity. And for you, when you were just imagining what's that time when time has just flown by and you didn't know you were doing what you were doing, it might be when you were doing an activity that you love, like running or skiing or playing the piano. It's like we get transported to another dimension. But the thing is that flow is largely a subjective experience and a mental state of high concentration and hypervigilance. And it's characterized by profound mental clarity, heightened situational awareness, emotional detachment, and an automatic nature. We don't think so much as we just act fluidly and thoughtlessly. We just know what to do. We really access our intuition and in the moment do whatever needs to be done. But the thing is, flow can't happen if we're distracted, since it takes us away from our focus. An experience of flow requires a distraction-free environment. And let's face it, how many of us really have a distraction-free environment? So here's a little tip for you from my training. When I train to be a high flow performance consultant, is to turn off all the notifications on our phone and on your computer. We want to create an environment where there are no distractions. And the other thing they suggested that we did was actually make the screen of our phone black so you didn't get distracted to look at pictures at it. And you moved all your social mobile apps to the last tab of all of the apps that you've got on your phone. And I've got to say, it's made a massive difference. It stops me jumping in and just looking at social media throughout the day. So that's just a little trick that we learned that was really helpful, because I think we can probably all agree that we live in an environment that is massively distraction orientated, right? There's always things to distract us. And actually keeping our attention is the biggest challenge. And flow follows focus. So really important that we cannot get flow unless we are focused, which means we need to be in a distraction-free environment. What kind of state is flow marked by? How do we know that we're going to have this? We're going to see intense focus. We're going to see team members fully engaged in their tasks. There's also going to be real clarity on the goals. Everyone understands the objectives and how they contribute to the team's success. And there's also immediate feedback. Team members receive real-time responsive to their actions and allow for quick adjustments. So there are 4 states to how we get into flow. And I wanted to share those with you before we look at why flow is important in teams. So we need to understand these stages of flow, and the state you're in indicates where you are in that flow cycle. And this is crucial for harnessing the optimal state of consciousness to enhance your performance. So let's break it down. The 4 stages of flow. Because flow isn't just a binary experience of being in the zone or out of the zone. Instead, it's this 4-stage cycle. And it actually starts with struggle. That's the first stage. And this is where you face the challenge or the obstacles. And it often involves effort and can be really frustrating. However, it's really essential that we go through this stage of struggle, as it sets the groundwork for the flow experience. So it's really important that we embrace the struggle, because it's a necessary part of the process. And what a lot of people do is, when we get to that struggle, that's when we quit. And we don't therefore move into the next stage. Because the second stage of the 4 stages of flow is release. So after the struggle, you need to let go of the tension and the stress. This involves a global release of nitric oxide, which helps push the stress hormones out of your system. So what we need to do during this relaxing phase is engage in activities that promote relaxation, such as deep breathing, mindfulness, or maybe even going for a walk. So it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? We're trying to get into the flow state. We do a struggle. Then we have to step away and do a release before we can come back and actually access the flow state. The flow state is actually when you feel at your best and you perform your best. As we said, you experience this selflessness, this time dilation, an emerging of action and awareness, and everything else fades away and you become fully absorbed in the task at hand. And what we see is when that people access this flow state, they actually achieve extraordinary levels of performance, both physical and mental. And this is why we can see people achieving things like world records in the Olympic Games, for example, but we see it in work, people achieving amazing things that perhaps we didn't even think were possible. Or just think about it, a time that you might access the flow state is actually when you are in a life-threatening situation. A really drastic example, maybe you see your child's got stuck under a big rock or a car or something, and all of a sudden you're able to access this superhuman strength to move a vehicle, for example. That's an example of you being in flow in this state. And then it's really important, the final state of the flow states is recovery. So it's really important that after we've been in the flow state to allow ourselves time to recover, because this phase helps us integrate the experience and prepare for the next cycle. So during this recovery stage, we want to reflect on what worked and what didn't, and so that we can recharge our mental and physical energy. So the states that indicate that you're in flow, you can recognize through several phenomenological characteristics. You lose your sense of self and you become completely immersed in the activity. Your ego takes a backseat, allowing for greater creativity and focus. We've got this time dilation that we talked about. It's like time stands still. Our perception of time changes. And we can often feel like hours pass when it feels like only minutes have gone by. Or actions feel automated and fluid. You experience a sense of ease that tasks that usually require effort seem to flow naturally. And finally, you've got this intense focus. You're absorbed in the task with a heightened sense of concentration. The distraction fades away and your intention is laser focused and present in the moment. So why is flow important in teams? It helps enhance collaboration. So when team members experience flow, they're more likely to collaborate effectively. And the state fosters open communication and trust, leading to better problem solving. So if you think about when we can access flow states with collaboration, it's like we get collaboration on steroids. It also provides increased productivity. And what the research has shown is that individuals in flow can accomplish tasks faster and with higher quality. And what does that mean in the workplace? Well, that means that teams meet deadlines and achieve goals more effectively and efficiently. Flow is also really important in teams because it results in higher job satisfaction. When team members are engaged and enjoying their work, they're less likely to experience burnout, and therefore there's less likely to be turnover within the organization, and that creates a more stable team environment for us. And finally, flow is important for teams because of this creativity and innovation that it causes. It encourages people to think creatively, think out of the box, and come up with innovative solutions and challenges. And I think we can all agree that we live in a world where innovative thinking and this critical thinking that we've talked about previously is so important. If a business is to stay on the cutting edge of what it's doing, it needs to continually innovate. We've seen the technology curve is just literally straight up, right? It's accelerating at such a fast rate. And if we look at any of the research, it talks about just in terms of skills that are relevant today in 3 or 4 years will be obsolete. So what does that say for your company? We've seen this with companies all the time. Companies that are unable to reinvent themselves find themselves falling along the wayside. And we've talked many times about examples such as Kodak and Nokia. and Blockbuster videos, for example. They're just companies that used to be high street names that have just disappeared because they didn't innovate and move with the times. So, how, as a business leader, are you going to foster an environment where we can help flow happen? And I'm going to share with you some actionable steps that you can take. First of all, we've talked about minimizing disruption. So maybe there's something about how you set up your workplace that's really important. Maybe you need to have zones where people can go where there are no distractions. I know that a lot of offices now are open plan, but actually that can have a lot of distractions around it. So that might not be the optimal place to help team members get into flow. So apart from having a disruption-free environment, we need to set really clear goals. We need to ensure that every team member understands their individual and collective purpose. And something we use for this is called the Massive Transformative Purpose Framework, MTP. And it aligns the team objectives with the larger vision. It's also really important, though, that having set these clear goals, that we continually go back and revisit them, then keep them relevant and motivated, because, as we said, the business landscape keeps changing. So sometimes it means that we need to do a pivot on our massive transformational purpose in order to keep it relevant to what we need to do today. We've already talked about minimizing disruptions. So creating that supportive environment where disruptions are minimized so that team members can communicate openly about their needs to focus and collaborate. So that might be, as we've talked about, going back to considering quiet hours or designated spaces for deep work. Thirdly, we might want to encourage autonomy. We need to allow team members to take ownership of their tasks, to trust our team members, empower them to make the right decisions and explore creative solutions. So as a leader, sometimes one of the challenges is that we don't want to give away control. But actually, when we empower our team members to get on and do something, we set the goal really clearly, what we want to do and the timeline it needs to happen in. And we empower our team members to go and get that task done. It creates for them a sense of engagement, creativity, autonomy, that they're not being micromanaged and they get to do what they want to do. That contributes, importantly, to what the business needs. A really key part of helping people get into flow and maintaining flow is providing regular feedback. So I would really encourage you to establish a culture of continuous feedback. Allow your team members to share insights and constructive criticism regularly. And I think this is something that's often not done very well in organizations. Some people are afraid of giving feedback. They think that they might be seen criticizing other people. But actually, feedback is what makes us all grow and what collectively is going to help move the organization forward. So we might want to include weekly check-ins or performance reviews to facilitate the process. At the beginning of each meeting, I'd really encourage you to have a check-in with people. How are we getting on in this project? What do people need help with? Other teams can provide feedback. But we want to create this continual environment where we're always sharing with each other feedback on how we're all doing. And that's for the collective success of what we're doing. It provides collective accountability, actually, which is really important. We also want to promote skills development. So we want to invest in training and development programs that enhance team members' skills. And that not only boosts their confidence, but also helps them tackle challenges effectively. We always want to think about how we can align team members' personal goals with the goals of the business. Because again, that's going to be a way to ensure people are more engaged and more aligned with what the business is doing. And finally, we want to foster a sense of community. We want to create these opportunities for relationship building. And those can include the team activities, social events, or collaborative projects. Because when we improve communication and connection between team members through building relationships, This encourages more open communication and vulnerability, and that strengthens the relationships. So we also want to understand how to measure flow within the team. And I want to share with you a couple of strategies about how we can measure flow. Employee engagement surveys can work in this regard, or maybe even some performance metrics tracking productivity and product outcomes to identify patterns related to flow states. And looking for correlation between the flow experiences and successful project completion. So what team members can actually get individual flow states. There is also something I want to share with you, which is a state called group flow. And group flow is the shared collective version of the flow state where individuals in the group experience heightened performance and creativity together. And the phenomenon is not just about individual excellence, it's about how people can synchronize their efforts and emotions to achieve the state of optimal collaboration. Not unsurprisingly, the key characteristics of group flow are pretty similar to individual flow in that we require the shared goals so that we're all working towards the same objective and we're aligned. They also require, of course, as we'd expect, complete concentration. We need the group to focus intensely at the task in hand, minimizing distractions and enhancing collective engagement. We need familiarity, right? We need the members of the group to understand each other's unconscious cues and tendencies, to be able to read the invisible energy in the room. And it's that familiarity that builds trust and allows for smoother interactions. We also require equal participation because every team member needs to be involved and needs to contribute. And if someone's not engaged, that can actually disrupt the flow. We need open communication. Transparency is absolutely critical if we're going to get group flow. So everyone needs to have this access to the same information and be on the same page to maintain harmony. We also need to share the risk, of course. Engaging in shared risk can enhance the experience. It not only boosts dopamine levels, but it can also foster a sense of camaraderie through the shared experience. And there's some science behind group flow that I'm just going to briefly touch on here. There's neurochemical benefits. So group flow releases a cocktail of feel-good chemicals, including dopamine and oxytocin. And that enables the overall experience to be more pleasurable than individual flow because we've got increased amounts of a dopamine and oxytocin going through our system. There's also an evolutionary perspective. So from the evolutionary standpoint, group flow promotes cooperation and innovation. And when team members collaborate, they can generate new ideas and resources, which is beneficial for survival and progress. And as humans, we are hardwired to want to survive and thrive. So we've got this evolution going on that's happening in the background. That it was one of the drivers for flow. And so the group flow matters because we get this enhanced performance and we can achieve outcomes that are greater than the sum of its parts. We've always talked about teamwork, the 1 and 1 equals 3. And that's absolutely the case with group flow. In group flow, we get even more productivity and performance than in individual flow. And importantly, we get those strong connections. Relationships build and we create this high-performing culture where everyone wants to work together. And I just think back to the Olympics over the summer where we saw what could happen with good group flow. We saw some of our swimming teams, for example, the way that they work together as individuals, successful in their own rights, but when they all come together and all align, the results are exponential. So group flow is this way that we can foster collaboration, creativity, and connection among our group members. And as leaders, if we can understand and leverage the triggers of group flow, individuals and organizations can unlock new levels of performance and innovation. And this is so important for us because we've always talked about teamwork being a superpower that we need to access. And so when we can access group flow, we actually increase this superpower of teamwork. So my invitation to you to this week is to really go away and think about how can you access flow states for your team members individually, but more importantly, within your team. Because when you do access these flow states, you are absolutely going to amplify the performance within your business. If you're curious and would like to learn more about how do you access high flow performance states, then please do reach out for a conversation. I do offer individual and team coaching on how we can get teams into flow by using the neuroscience behind performance to make this work. So I think it's really exciting that we can actually now find the science behind this that actually can help us unlock the hidden potential within our teams. So I hope you've found this kind of light, rather rapid touch into the power of peak performance by unleashing flow. Interesting and exciting. And as I said, if you'd like to learn more, please do reach out to me. So until next week, have an amazing time and enjoy the power of finding your flow state. And I'd love to hear what puts you into flow. What activities are occurring when you are in an optimal flow state? And how can you help your team achieve that too? Okay, until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and at Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?